Shaun, thank you so much for being my first guest on my podcast, Tech Podcast about Israel.
Thrilled to be here. I shaved just for you.
Thank you. Me too. You might not see it.
Yeah, I don't see it.
At least I worked some of it. But I got to tell you, as a friend, and I consider you a brother now. Everything we've been through behind the scenes and everything we've done. Thank you so much for all the support and everything you've been doing for Israel. First I was exposed to it since October 7th, but your unwavering support to Israel has been so amazing, and I've heard that on so many different setups, whether it's government setups and it's entrepreneur setups and many others. It's just been amazing. We'll never forget that. It's been so amazing. So thank you for you staying up with the truth in Israel.
I love Israel. I'll fight for Israel forever, and I view this fight is not just for Israel; it's for the whole West, with Israel being the tip of the spear. But I absolutely love Israel.
That's so much. So what was the turning point for you? Like, did it always like that? I know you come from a very Zionist family, and I was, it was new to me. But
I was a stealth Jew before.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, okay. So in terms of my love for Israel, I had a great grandfather. His name was Arthur Cohen, and I lived with my grandparents and my parents and my sister as a kid. And our great grandfather lived close to us. We'd go to his house a lot after school. And he would tell us about Israel and told us that, there's only two places in the world that are safe for Jews, Israel and America, and we have to fight for both of them. And so I got some of that exposure to Israel as a kid, but I didn't go to Israel until I was about 21 years old. One of my friends was doing math research at the Weizmann Institute. His name's Boris Hannon. He signed my ketubah. Mm-hmm. He's a professor at Princeton now. Amazing guy. He's a brother. But he was doing research. I came to visit him, and as a kid, I wasn't raised very Jewish, and I just had this almost out of body experience. It was, at the time, I'd probably been to like 60 countries, and Israel was just completely different for me. I felt this connection that I couldn't explain. And honestly, on that trip, I told myself I need to marry an Israeli woman, and which very few people say that, but
Israel's tough.
And not just an Israeli, a Persian Jewish Israeli woman. So she's very tough. She's my boss, but absolutely.
And your wife's family also have an amazing history in the country of Israel. They've been one of the early, contributor to the country of Israel, right?
Yeah, and I'm very proud of my wife's family history here, and basically my wife's grandfather's a man named Itzhak Parviz Nazarian. He died a few years ago, but he is from Iran. When he was about 17, he came to Israel in 1947, joined the Haganah, fought in the War of Independence, got injured in a tank, and couldn't drive and couldn't fight anymore. So he became a driver. He was Golda Meir's driver for about 5 years in the beginning of the country, and then was involved in kind of the early building of the country. Then left, went back to Iran, and ended up coming back, then going to America. And he's a real legend. And when you talk to people that were involved in the early days of the country, like they all knew Itzhak or Parviz. He went by both names. Anyways, it's like, we're very, very proud of him in the family.
That's so amazing. And so how did you get, what was your initial impression from October 7th? And I know it was like a big, shock for a lot of American Jews, and obviously here in Israel. Yeah. I woke up in the morning and, fire missiles at Israel and Tel Aviv and everything that's going on.
I'll be honest, I wasn't surprised by October 7th in any way. There's very little that's happened either then or after that surprised me. For myself, I've been following war my whole life. A lot of people in my family were in the military, the U.S. military. I deployed to Afghanistan supporting the U.S. military. I worked in intelligence and in technology. And I've been to about 100 countries, and I view the world as a system. And so I'd say the two dimensions in which I wasn't surprised. One is there's been flare-ups here, every 5 to 10 years forever. And, I think you'd be a fool to think that won't, we're at the end of history and, that won't happen again. But the real driver of those flare-ups the last 25 years ago or so has been Iran. So I follow Iran incredibly closely. And even the timing of October 7th, I follow the Ayatollah's Twitter account very closely. I get alerts for his tweets. And about 2 weeks before October 7th, there was this giant military parade in Iran. It was by far the biggest in history. There was few hundred.
What, end of September?
It was call it September 21st or something like that. I think Memory was the first to cover it around September 27th, September 28th. Wow. But they had a giant, probably 300 meter long, flag on the ground that was written in Hebrew, and it basically said "Death to Israel." Mm-hmm. And then there was also part of it written in Farsi. There were also after that big military parade, is the biggest in Iranian history. I've been trained to follow these signals. These things mean something. And in a country like Iran, you do those actions to motivate people so that they're prepared for what's to come in case it backfires a bit. And so anyways, I didn't ignore it. And then I follow Khamenei's Twitter very closely. And he basically, normally about once or twice a year, he'll say something very bad about Israel. The week before October 7th, he basically had 3 or 4 tweets saying Israel's about to be destroyed. So anyways, people need to pay a little closer attention to what is actually coming out of the Ayatollah's mouth. And then the other dimension is the anti-Semitism. And I think a lot of, especially American Jews, they thought that anti-Semitism was gone. I have so many friends who were just shocked by the reaction of people. And again, I think it's a lesson of history that anti-Semitism doesn't ever go away. It can get subdued, but it doesn't ever go away. And anyways, we can talk about some of that if you want. But
one of the things that, to me, October 7th was such a black and white thing. So it was there's no argument that you can make, that a compelling argument to walk into people kibbutz and then murder kids and burn their families alive. So it's such a black and white thing. So it's if you stand against Israel now and you also have all these different excuses to whatever happened, it's this is a point where I've argued many times with my good friends in the NBA and some in other areas. It's we need the support now because this is such a black and white thing. And it feels I don't know, I'd love to hear your opinion, but it feels like a lot of the American Jewry since October 7th, there's much more affiliation to Israel now. It's becoming more in the agenda now. So it's even our political affiliation, not necessarily from being a Republican or Democrat, but even in our Democratic or Republican nominees, we would ask them to speak about Israel and to support Israel publicly and to be there for us. Yeah. So you see that? For sure.
It's been a huge awakening moment for a lot of American Jews. There's still a long way to go though. And a lot of people still they just don't know what to believe. We've all been exposed to so much misinformation, alternative histories, etc. And if you're not willing to spend thousands of hours literally, or do firsthand research, going to places, talking to people, it's really hard for people to know what the truth is. And I think that's really at the heart of a lot of the Jews in particular that are confused.
So you touched a little bit about when you were 21, when you came to Israel for the first time, and it kind of changed your perspective about Israel and about life and everything around that. Yeah. So from a high level perspective, you're one of the focal points bringing Elon to Israel, and so
with you
together. Thank you. But you think having Elon in Israel and touch ground, he's been to Israel once before, I think, but being here on the ground and seeing everything and seeing the energy would change, I don't necessarily change, but would strengthen his ties to Israel and the belief in truth. That was your thinking behind all this?
Look, I don't want to take credit for anything. We helped facilitate the trip and all of that. But from my perspective, Elon is one of the best people in the world at seeing through complexity and distilling it down to the simple terms and what's actually happening. And obviously not everyone agrees with Elon, but I think for 10 to 15% of people that are kind of in the middle, they really look to his explanations of things and his opinion on things. I think he probably has more swing over that middle than almost anyone. And, he, at the time people were saying he's an anti-Semite, which was the craziest thing for me because he's just the furthest thing possible from an anti-Semite. And so I think The trip showed a lot of people that maybe they had the wrong facts and that they should think more deeply about these things. And it's actually, I think, part of this bigger narrative that a lot of information we keep banking from the media for 10 to 20 years has been totally wrong. And so, look, I think Elon deserves huge. The guy is willing to actually go into battle. He's willing to work 20 hours a day, 7 days a week. Like, he's willing to sleep in the factory floor. He's willing to fly into a war zone. I think he deserves a lot of respect for that.
No question. I think one of the things that, the couple of days after, I think it was like literally 24 hours later, when he was on stage on New York Times and he held the dog chain of the family of the hostages, it really touched me to the bones. It's like putting on the stage like this. And
I'm still wearing the dog tags we got from that trip. We were
so amazing
at the president's house.
That's so amazing. And then, that was the first time when doing the 12 hours that we were with him that day, it felt like when the family of the hostages came to Elon, really touched him. He was crying a little bit in had some tears in his eyes, and it really impacted him. So thank you for all that. And
we do all this as a team. Like, I don't deserve much credit. But you did.
We'll give you the credit, most of it. But on that note, also, also kudos to you and your family. You spent here 2 months now, so it's like in the middle of the war, north, everything's going on. You brought your family, your kids, everyone here, and you spent 2 months in the country. So what was you thinking behind that?
Look, I'm a fighter, for better or worse. And like, my whole life, if I see something that I think is unfair, I'm just going to, like, if a kid was getting bullied, I'm going to go jump in the fight and try to defend that kid or pull the bullies off. And just immediately after October 7th, I felt like, first of all, I knew what was going to happen to Israel in terms of it getting bullied, and I wanted to show support. And so, something that I haven't shared, but this is me, basically immediately after October 7th, told my wife, like, we're going to Israel for the summer. We're renting a house. And with the house I rented, I insisted that we prepay. And so we didn't have to pay the money until, like a month before, whatever, a small down payment. We just sent the whole amount of money. I literally wanted to send money into the country, and, knew that the economy would freeze up, tourism would go down. And so I don't know. For me, the Jews in Israel carry the burden for the Jews around the world. And I think it's unfair for Jews in the West to not do what they can to try to help.
Right. It means so much to us Israelis, and I think in the first couple of months of since the beginning of the war, I used to visit a lot of hospitals and visit a lot of, at the beginning it was citizens, right, in hospitals. And then later on, more soldiers. Hopefully we're not going to have any soldiers or any citizens in hospitals. But, I went with a lot of friends from America, and the reactions of seeing not just American Jews, it was primarily American Jews and Jews around the world coming to support, but people outside of Israel coming, and the narrative and the felt so appreciative of the people in Israel, seeing folks coming from abroad saying, thank you so much for being with us now. It's did you feel that connection? It was like people really appreciate you being here.
Definitely. No, I mean, and it feels unfair. It's like when the sacrifice of someone going into Gaza for 8 months versus like, I spend 10 hours a week putting out some tweets, and it's insane to get any credit for that or appreciation. But the bar is very low for the Jews in the West.
That's so amazing. But on a sharp kind of, maybe even a continuous of conversation, I think Sequoia a couple months ago announced that they're reopening an Israeli office. You guys hired Dean Meyer, which is amazing as a partner on the ground.
He's an amazing guy.
He's an amazing guy. I think you guys couldn't pick anyone better. He's really amazing. He came from sports. He was a soccer player.
He's a professional soccer player.
We're not going to hold it against him. We're basketball guys, but he also played paddle now, and he's an amazing guy. And you guys he interacted in the ecosystem so well. From let's call it an outsider. He didn't grow up here, and he was such an amazing guy, and he became an Israeli to all means necessary. So Sequoia, obviously, the best branding venture. I just read an article a couple of days ago with Roelof, but also the 5 of the best, the largest, market cap companies in the world are venture backed, and 3 of them are Sequoia, right? So you guys at NVIDIA early at seed.
We did the seed in NVIDIA, Series A in Google,
and Apple. I think is another one of them.
Series A in Apple.
It's not bad. It's not. These are not bad.
I wasn't there for any of those.
But really, Sequoia is like the best branding venture worldwide. And it's no coincidence you guys are good. Interacting with you guys and investing with you guys and seeing the value you guys provide to your portfolio companies, but also the resource that you guys have and the screening of companies and so on. There's a reason. Yes, it helps to be Sequoia, but also that you guys have really amazing investors, within your organization. So it's great to invest with you. So where was with everything that's going on, you guys are making a bold decision to, we'll come in and invest now. Like what's the, I'm sure there's some, people scared. For sure.
I've got maybe 4 parts to this answer. First part is that Sequoia doesn't do anything as charity from the fund level. Which I think is very bullish on Israel.
I love it.
And we're pretty serious about this. Like there's a point of view at Sequoia that if you start trying to optimize for 2 things, you won't do either well. And so we really view that our number 1 goal is to make as much money as possible. But there's a caveat, which is we try to make that money for great causes. So about 70% of our limited partners are nonprofits that we consider great causes. Hospitals and universities. The universities are maybe becoming less of a great cause than they were 40 years ago. But so it's just, we try to make as much money as possible. We try to do it for great causes. And so the fact that we're doing a lot more in Israel, first point is we think that there's a huge amount of money to be made. And it's a great investment opportunity. Second point is I want to give credit to my partner, Roelof Botha, who runs Sequoia. Roelof has a really hard job, and he's a very principled guy, and he's not someone that you can intimidate with like the woke agenda or just with pressure from what other people tell you is right. Like he really tries to do what he thinks is the best financial decision for the firm, also the morally correct decision. And wow, there's not many people in the world that are like that. And I really, I can't begin to tell you how much I appreciate that, how impressed I've been. And then the third thing is that Sequoia has been crushing it in Israel for decades, but then especially in the last 5 years or so. And, if you go back, Sequoia was the first investor, basically incubated Palo Alto Networks. Palo Alto was based in America, but it was an Israeli founder, Nir Zook. We were the first investors in Mellanox, which was acquired by NVIDIA, and a lot of people, so that was also a seed. People don't realize how important of an acquisition that was for NVIDIA. In my opinion, I think that's probably the most important acquisition in history.
Right.
Like I literally believe that the reason why NVIDIA is dominating everyone right now and is now a $3 trillion market cap company is because they acquired Mellanox, which let them sell full systems instead of individual GPUs. And there's so much more value in the system. So anyways, and then the last is, I would say, like, on the edges, after you meet the criteria of there's a lot of money to be made and that it, people feel like it's the right thing to do and that we have a long history. The reality is we do the things that we love doing. You spend your time, if you have to choose between company A or company B for an investment, you're like, and they're equal financial return profiles, you're going to choose the one that you connect with more. And it's like for myself and for a few other people, like we love supporting Israel. We love investing in Israel. And so that's the tiebreaker in this situation.
And so what if you look at Sequoia globally, like what do you guys look in founders? Like what makes you guys tick?
Yeah.
What makes you, Shaun, tick?
Well, so the firm, we look for people that have grit. Like that's probably number 1. We look for underdogs. We look for people with chips on their shoulders. And so that's part of why we're here in Israel too. It's like almost by definition, if you are Israeli, you are going to have grit. You're going to have that underdog mentality. You're going to have a chip on your shoulder. And I think it's part of why Israeli founders have been so successful. And I think like it's going to be even more extreme the next decade, like after October 7th. I think the things that are going to come out of Israel the next few years are going to blow people's minds, just with that irrational drive inside of people, the drive that you have.
Right. Oh, well, we have to. And it's one of the arguments that I love is like, it's like Israelis are backs against the wall. It's like, we don't have another choice. Like it's either we die or we create value, on October 7th, one of the memos I sent to my teams on October 8th is, while Hamas and the terror organization are trying to kill us, we must create value to the world. And we should double down on that. And quite frankly, 70% of the workforce or 50% of the workforce in a certain company was in Miluim and reserve duty.
For sure.
And then the company exceeded expectations by the next quarter, which is amazing, and this is the type of the mentality that we love about, our, Israeli founders. And one of the things that we see also, and we'd love to kind of pick your brain on that as well, is it feels like the Israeli market and the ecosystem has matured. Now there's more, I like to call them repeat folks and repeat founders that, they built a business for. Now you have Wiz now at much higher valuations, and now they're deciding not to sell, whatever the case may be. So if they're more experienced, they have more exposure to like large American enterprises. So it feels like the ecosystem has matured to become potentially bigger companies coming out of Israel. And there's more capital on the other end of the spectrum too. If many years ago there was maybe few funds investing in Israel, there's over 100 investing in seed. So it's like feels like there's maturity level to build big companies out of Israel these days, or hopefully bigger than what was in the past. How do you read that assessment?
Oh, I 100% agree. I think you said it well. I think that the really big companies created by Israelis in the past were created outside of Israel, Palo Alto Networks, for example, but there's also some semiconductor companies. You could argue that Qualcomm had a bunch of Israeli founders, even though they lived in America. You could argue that there's a few other big companies. But I think now inside Israel, there's that just the understanding of what it takes to build giant companies and the ambition to do so. And so anyways, very, very optimistic.
Absolutely. So we'd love to kind of get behind the scenes with you guys. So you guys screen a lot, and then to take a meeting with you guys, like what's the best way to approach you? How do we get in touch with Shaun and Sequoia? And then if kind of to follow up on that, like what's the usually the process? We'd love to get into like the investment committee thesis. I'm sure you have the best investors in the world, so there's a lot of counter arguments to make decisions, and you got to be really good to get past and be a Sequoia company. So what's the kind of thinking behind that as well?
So there's two questions. The first part is like how to get in front of us. Second part is it's like how do we make decisions? On the getting in front of us, I'm in Israel. I'm a direct person. I'll be honest. Like it's hard. It can be hard to get in front of us. Like people have done the math at Sequoia on how many companies try to talk to us per year, and it's different per partner. It's different per year, but it's in the thousands per partner per year. Each person will meet with, call it, 400 new companies a year, something like that. It's like 2 a day outside of Mondays. And so there's already like, a factor of 10 drop off from the decks that get sent to you or the kind of the referrals. Out of those, call it 400 that you meet with, you'll invest in 4 of them or so. It's just an insane, like 1%. It's like
1% of what you see.
1% of what you see. It's an insanely low ratio. And there's a lot of randomness to it. Like, and I think this is something that I'm a former founder, so I have a lot of empathy for founders. Something that I didn't appreciate when I was a founder is there's really a lot of randomness and luck to like who you raise money from and all of that. And I think it's worth appreciating that because it means that you should keep trying, keep reaching out to people, find other ways in. And I'll give you a few different dimensions of that. So one is like different investors, like sometimes you're really busy as an investor and sometimes you're not. Like if one of your companies is getting acquired, you're fully all in on that and you don't have as much time to meet with companies. But if you're at a low point, you just say yes to the cold email or whatever. That's one dimension. Another dimension is investors, like at Sequoia, we think a lot about why now or what's changing in the world. And so for myself, even though I started a defense tech company, I wouldn't meet with most defense tech companies that reached out to me 3 or 4 years ago because I didn't feel like there was a very strong why now. I would meet with them if they had just an unbelievable outlier background or founder market fit. But now, like after the war in Ukraine and now after the war in Israel, defense tech is something that has very strong why now. It's like budgets are changing, the technologies are changing. And so these are the things that as a founder, it's like if you messaged me the day before Russia invaded Ukraine as a defense tech founder, I might have said no. And then the day after I'd say yes. And it doesn't mean like, obviously the founder is ahead of the curve, but I also think that it's rational for the VC to say no before that change actually happens. And so just, you got to understand how much randomness there is and how stacked the odds are against you. And so you got to try different approaches, like different paths for intros, all that. And on the decision making, another thing that I think is hard for people to understand on the outside, it's like at Sequoia, we make decisions unanimously.
Oh, really? Wow.
Literally unanimously. Everyone has veto on every investment. And like Ruloff can get vetoed, Doug can get vetoed.
Wow.
And sometimes like the newest,
and how many partners are got to vote anonymously?
Everyone, even like a 22-year-old analyst,
Wow.
even a 22-year-old analyst has veto rights. I haven't seen an analyst veto something in 5 years, but one did veto something 5 years ago. And I respect the chutzpah.
Wow.
It was crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we see in Israel now, which is evolving, I think it's worldwide. And I saw a podcast at 20 VC talking about it as well. Is they called it the super seed, right?
Yeah.
It's like a seed that is $20 million at let's call it 60, 70, 80 posts, and there's counter arguments for both sides. And so one of the things, like I invested in a company called Upwind. Amiram Shachar really built a scale business. It was $100 million ARR business. So one of the things that when I underwrote the company is like, obviously Amiram is one of my best friends and I loved him and I wanted to be with him in business. It's like, listen, he saw scale, he built, sales teams and so on. So the risk is associated with the price we're willing to pay. And obviously there are cyberstars and great luck, really good investors also in the capital, which really obviously help. So how do you see that? Because it's like one of the sentiments now in the market, everybody feels like they can raise a little bit more, and then they go out and they make sometimes maybe naive mistakes of like coming saying we want to raise 20, 30 million. And then they get a no in a really good team that should be raised money from the Sequoias of the world.
Yeah. I mean, look, you're taught to never negotiate against yourself. And so I shouldn't give like blanket playbook of these companies get to go straight to $20 million rounds. But I would just say the way I think about it in Israel, for example, is the second time founders that have done something at scale, call it a couple $100 million exit or more, they got real revenue. The reality is those founders are going to jump straight to a Series A. I wouldn't call it super seed. I would just call it a combined. Yeah, they're just jumping straight to a Series A. And then I think that but that's really reserved for second time founders, so that have proven that they can do it before. I think it's not just second time founders, it's second time founders with a clear idea, or it doesn't have to be a clear idea, but like a clear insight. So with the Wiz founders, when we first met with them, their idea wasn't fully set, but they had very clear point of view that cloud security was broken and that there was a huge opportunity in cloud security and that they would kind of iterate to that. And so that was one, they jumped straight to Series A, and obviously it was a good decision for us, but it's like super elite second time founders that have been running a lot of cloud security inside Microsoft. So they got to see it at scale. And they had a really strong, good idea that we agreed with, which was cloud security is broken. And so I think that's basically the bar to go straight to Series A, at least with Sequoia. And then I would say, if you have really elite founders that are, say, Talpiot or some elite unit or did great things in the military, but are still young, like straight out of college or the army, like that's going to be a seed, even if they're really talented.
So you're not willing to take the risk of paying, let's say, 60 posts rather than something which you like, it's still, there's yet to be seen. I
think you basically have to be second time founders with a strong, unique insight to go straight to those terms with us. Not always, not black and white, but like in general.
Makes sense. So also on that, maybe a tiny bit different perspective. So let's say you do, or second, like does they change the approach of Sequoia? So instead of writing a $5 million check, you guys have to, let's say you're leading a $20 or $30 million, let's call it, you guys write 14, 15, which is a much bigger check. Does they change also the convictions you guys have on the investment committee side?
We have unanimous decision making for
both,
everything, for both.
Wow.
But I think that the bar does become
right. And that's where you like everybody's like, okay, so we really got to dive deep into this. Like, this is a much bigger check for us.
Sure.
So it's like, so sometimes
it's like, look, for the bigger check, it's 20 reference calls instead of 5. It's really trying to understand who are these founders, what are their strengths and weaknesses, like how robust is the unique insight or the idea. All that. So
there's any, so you've been an investor now for Sequoia. There's any things that you don't like as much as an investor? You're a founder before too, so you're really hands-on building, and now as an investor, there's a little bit of a different perspective there now. Look,
it's funny, all the memes about how VCs don't work and all that. And for what it's worth, let me ask you, you're a former NBA player,
right?
And obviously you worked. It's hard to work harder than as something, and the stress you're undergoing, like playing competition basketball is insane. But like, was being a VC more or less work than you thought it would be?
It's less than I thought it would be.
Oh, and it's not what I thought you were going to say.
Really? So it's maybe because I know nothing other than basketball. Because I've never been an entrepreneur, never been in the business world. Because when I was dedicated to the game of basketball, I was like doing this 24/7, night in and night out, and under so much pressure. And then suddenly you go and you take a meeting. To me, in the beginning, was like, that's work. I love doing this, But I do feel like maybe to a counter, argue what I just said. Like, I do feel like, as an outsider, I came in very, naive and raw into the tech ecosystem. I feel like there's a lot of value in good investors, and the really good ones really differentiate themselves from the others. So there's a lot of value there, and that's where I try to come in. It's like, I love working with fund like Sequoia, and they can really complement what I like to do, is like really to open doors in America and connect them to potential customers and so on.
No, we love working with you, Omri. To all the founders listening, Omri's insanely high value add. He's especially in the go-to-market and sales and other VC interests. Look, I have a slightly different view, and I think part of it is probably being at Sequoia. Like, the real durable advantage of Sequoia is I think we just work harder than every other firm. Like, we work like psychos, and it's, that's similar to being a founder. It's very normal to do a 10, 11 p.m. call. Like, it's very normal to get invited to a last minute presentation on a Saturday, to spend your whole Saturday writing memos, and then your whole Sunday reading memos, and to be on the phone all weekend dealing with the challenges your companies have. I'm on a lot of boards. I don't even know how many, but call it 9 boards, 10 boards. And I think about it's kind of like being a doctor, where you're on call for your patients. Like, I'm on call for my companies, and whether it's good things, like companies get an M&A offer, or they need to close a candidate, or there isn't another round of financing and they need you to talk to an investor quickly, or they need your strategy negotiation, or the bad things, like the media is writing a bad article, or someone's suing you, or an employee's quitting, or a big sale is falling through, or something's churning, or all the, or employee drama, co-founder drama. I think that the more boards you're on, the crazier it becomes. And, I have a lot more geographic flexibility than as a founder. I think that's a big difference. As a founder, you need to be there, leading by example, being in the building for your team. As a VC, I think that you have actually less time flexibility than as a founder, because you're on call for all of these different companies, and you never know when fires are going to come up.
Did you ever felt like you had to fight really, really hard to win a deal? And so one of the, what is some of the things that you think, why should founder choose working with you?
For sure.
Sequoia?
I've had to fight really hard many times. One of which was the deal we did together that is not announced.
Yeah.
These guys have 40 term sheets.
Right.
Look, at the end of the day, in my experience, the thing that wins and loses deals is the quality of your founder references. And so when you can get really incredible founders to jump on the phone and say that, working with this person's amazing. Like, they're very high integrity. They have our back. They work their asses off for us.
Right.
So when you get really elite founders, but I think the other thing that a lot of people don't factor in is like, you don't want to have bad references.
Right.
Like when you have founders that you've worked with say that, like it's horrible working with this guy or whatever. It's kind of the companies that fail, and those references are just as important as the really good references. So you have to do well on both. And I think that at the end of the day, obviously like the quality of the firm and that brand is very important, but I think the next level is it's just your references.
And you kind of working with the partner that you're going to be with in business for 10 years or so.
For sure.
It's like one of the things that maybe entrepreneurs underestimate sometimes.
So
one of the things that Sequoia has done amazingly well is the in-generation transfer between talent. Mike and the kind of older folks of Sequoia, and then Sequoia Heritage, and then, what's in place for Sequoia today. So what's the, like, we'd love to, as Israelis, one of the things that venture funds have struggled in the past is this in-generation transfer, and then, continuing building a brand over many, many years. So what's the process of being an analyst or an associate, and then like maybe a junior partner to a partner, then partner to one of the GPs, and then one of the GPs to, you guys have, as the structure, you guys have 3 main GPs, right? So they kind of manage above everyone now, or how is that structure is?
I mean, on the last point, it's technically true, but it's not how it feels. Like from an investment, so basically from an investment decision-making perspective, that's not the case. From an investment decision-making perspective, we're a partnership, and basically everyone
amazing
vote is equal, and whoever knows the most about some company or category, like their vote carries the most weight. And then the kind of the 3 stewards, that is more for like the operations of the firm and all of that. And so it's nuanced, but really and I think it's actually important distinction, because you can't recruit the best people in the world if they feel like they're second-class citizens. Like they're just not going to do it.
So true. So amazing. Right.
And so that's just not, I kind of like get squeamish when people talk about it in a hierarchical way. Like I would not work in a hierarchical system. Sequoia is not hierarchical. I think one of the things that Sequoia has done unbelievably well over the years for transition is betting on people early, like giving them power and trust and compensation early in their careers. I think the failure mode of a lot of firms is the best investors and most senior people hold on to the reins for too long. They try to take too much of the compensation for too long and all of that. And that just breaks. Another thing, I think some of the, like one of the most amazing stories I heard about Sequoia, I'll give 2, but one is, Sequoia really tries to build up its next generation of partners. And so like with Alfred Lin, number 1 on the Midas list, incredible guy, one of my favorite humans in the world. Alfred's most famous investment is probably Airbnb. Alfred didn't lead the Airbnb investment. There was a partner before him named Greg McAdoo who led the original seed and I believe A. And Greg left. He had been a founder and very successful and had been at Sequoia for a while. And he retired basically and then ended up starting a deep tech focused firm. He's obsessed. He's really, really smart guy and really passionate about hardware. So Alfred, basically the firm had to figure out who's going to take over this board. Alfred was brand new, but Alfred had a really good operational background for it. He had been the CEO of Zappos, which is a very operationally intensive business. And the partnership said, Alfred, you should take this board. And for his worth, I think the Airbnb founders would talk about how important Alfred was in the history of the company. Like he was, really, really an important player there, but he didn't lead the initial investment. I think it says so much about Sequoia that they would give a new high potential investor this amazing board seat, rather than I think most other firms, like one of the really senior partners would have taken that board seat because then it gets to justify their compensation in the future, like 10 years in the future. Look how great I am. I'm on the board of this amazing company. Keep paying me a lot of money. Whereas Sequoia's view is, let's give it to the newer guy to really help make his career and give him this thing that will let him win these really, really competitive situations. And it was a rational decision because I think Alfred was able to help Airbnb achieve its whole potential more than anyone else. So there's actually a bunch of stories like that in Sequoia's history. And very few firms would do that. anyways, it's an amazing place.
Right. So one time we were at dinner with one of our founders. So basically, you need to provide a ton of value to the firm also, right? So you got to source the right deals, and then you obviously, so if you look at those 3 parameters, you're sourcing the right deals, picking the right one, and then providing value. Where do you feel like you like to kind of primarily focus on? Is it all 3, or is it?
Well, I would say there's one other thing that's really important, which is winning deals. And so I think about it's like those 4 things. Because there are some really amazing investors. Like people had really good investment judgment, but they just couldn't win the most competitive deals. And
interesting.
And that it's like, even if you have the best judgment in the world, if you can't win the investment, then it doesn't really matter. And so that it's just, I would add that one as well. For myself, I hate the phase of sourcing new companies. Like I really don't like doing that. I like doing diligence on companies once I have like already met the founder and kind of fallen in love with the company. I'll give you an example. I'm on the board of a company called Node, KNOWDE. It's in the chemicals space. We're basically like vertical SaaS company in the chemicals industry. Most people don't know anything about chemicals industry.
Right.
It's 5 trillion a year of sales. Like it's bigger than oil and gas. It's also, I think, the most fragmented industry in the world. Like the biggest company, BASF, does less than 2% of sales in the whole industry per year. And for me, like getting to do diligence on that company for a month of just talking to all these big chemical companies, and like you learn more about how the world works. And for me, that is a joy. But the idea of meeting with new founders, like just doing meeting after meeting where most of the companies aren't a good fit, like I find that very exhausting. And then I love winning. So I love selling and winning investments. And then look, I love being on boards and like helping founders build their companies. So those are the ones I like. But yeah, meeting with new founders is hard for me.
Right. So one of the things that I learned in my short period of time is that the really, really good investors are much, much better than everyone else. It's interesting comparison that we sometimes talk internally about having the very best engineers. Some of the very best ones are a lot better than everyone else.
For sure.
So it's like you work with the very best. There's so many different things that come around and opportunities. You know, one of the things that I struggled with, you know, I still kind of, it was a very uphill battle in the beginning when I started is that I came from basketball. So one of the things that, you know, folks were saying, you know, Omer, we love you and basketball is great. You've been with the captain of the national team. You've been in the NBA for 10 years, but what do you understand of, you know, let's call it cloud security posture management, right? And so what kind of value can you provide? So one of the things that I like, if we look at those 3-4 parameters that we talked about, is like one of the things that I've done from the very early days of the firm is really fly to the US and really try to provide a ton of value.
For sure.
It's like if you can provide, the way I looked at it is if I can provide the most value on the cap table, or like some of the most one, or alongside my co-investors, I'm going to be able to source better deals. I'm going to get into win into to some of the deals that I want to get into. And it's a work in progress, you know. It's like you really have to work hard and there's no other way, right? It's like it's my only way. And I feel like
I thought before you were saying you don't work hard as a VC. I'm teasing you, man.
It's a different hard work.
I know. I've seen how much you love the job.
I love the job.
And so I think
it's the best job in the world.
I think that's the difference is that, you know, and for me too, like I love the job. And so it doesn't feel like work, but I've seen how hard you work.
I should maybe frame it is basketball is such a physical and mental hard work.
Yeah.
It's much more of an intellectual, relationship driven hard work. So it's totally different. It doesn't mean you don't work hard. It's just a different. So it's like you go into a game, you play against LeBron James, he's coming down at you full speed, and it's like
you can't compare that.
And
stress.
It's dunking on you, and then it's like bullying you, and you go on Twitter, and there's like 20,000 mentions of you being you're not good, you're not this. So this pressure, constant pressure, being the only Israeli in the NBA, it's like you always live in it. And
you have your whole country's weight on your shoulders.
Exactly. And then it's like you wake up in the morning, it's like, oh, he's the best player in the world, or he's the worst, right? So it's like this pressure of constant. It's just different. Here, it's like it's much more intellectual, and so that's the way, you know. And
the one thing I would say though about Sequoia that I think is part of the magic of the firm is our Monday decision meetings they're really, really intense. Like,
really?
People remember basically every word that was said for 10 plus years into the future. Like we go in, it's I mean, like I've been to war. It's kind of like going to war or whatever, where you have to, I'll spend 2 days before playing through every possible scenario in my head, and
every argument going
and everyone does that. And there's incredible
and
amounts
these are
of money,
smart people, and they know the industry really well.
Yeah,
Data
really,
is something that, all these guys know, and security.
Sure. And it's full contact, and there's honestly billions of dollars on the line if you make the right decision or the wrong decision, or if your arguments are bad. And it's our Monday partner meetings are pretty insane.
There's ever like an argument what just ended where you said, you know what, I just think this guy's an iconic founder, and maybe the idea is not fully formalized and fully, focused or whatever, but we just want to back this guy because we think he's phenomenal. I think this is a Fortune 500 company. Is this sufficient enough?
So I would say each GP can use that argument like once every 5 years or so. And if you're wrong, it's almost a fireable offense.
Really? Wow. So it's like you got to be very sure to do that.
You got to be really sure to do that. Like that is not something that, like, we're very rigorous with our logic.
Even
and
at
data.
Seed, where it's like the ideas are not fully formalized?
Seed is different. I'm talking more like Series A.
Series A, you really got to have to show the market to go to, some reference from customers.
Yeah.
And so on.
Yeah. So I have seen things closer to that, and I've even done things closer to that. But if you're wrong, it's like you're going to be in a bad place.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And if you guys look at like, you invested in few Israeli companies, and we talked a little bit about like some of the good things Israelis do, right? The grit, the grind, they back against the wall mentality and so on. Like, what are the things you feel like Israelis should get better at? And maybe, kind of hear your perspective on that.
It's funny. Someone asked me this question a few weeks ago, and I think that the Israel ecosystem is evolving so quickly that I don't have a good answer, because whatever answer I have from like a year ago, the Israelis are already getting better at it.
That's awesome.
And so
so feedback loop is great.
The feedback loop is really tight. And 5 years ago, Israeli teams were not as good at sales and marketing, and they figured that out. And so I think that there's a culture in Israel of sharing learnings. Like when one company learns some new go-to-market, when Wiz learns some new go-to-market idea, it's quickly adopted by all the other founders here. And so the ecosystem is really evolving quickly.
That's great. Yeah. This is great feedback on the market. I completely agree. And maybe just to touch, from an high-level perspective, Israel is very famous and advanced in the sense of security and cybersecurity in Israel, right? There's a couple of really big companies. Palo obviously is part Israeli. We have many other kind of early stage. I think there's a lot of funds investing in security. What's your kind of perspective when you look at cyber now in Israel?
Yeah.
It feels like it's somewhat more consolidated, maybe, and it's harder maybe to build the bigger companies. Yeah. What do you guys' perspective?
Look, I think security is an evergreen field. I think security is simultaneously like one of the most competitive. It's like the most competitive enterprise market, but it's also probably the most evergreen enterprise market, because like cybersecurity is always a response to technological changes, and any technological change will like lead to cybersecurity opportunity. And so there's this cat and mouse game where there's always opportunities to create new cyber companies. Whereas another enterprise area, say networking, I think networking goes through phases where it's like there's only a big opportunity maybe every 10 years, but that opportunity will be very, very big. And that's when there's like a giant change in like how people use the internet. Going from using the internet at home to the cloud, or, consuming Netflix, there's only these big changes every 10 years or so. And so I think security is evergreen, but it's super competitive, super saturated. And I think that, 95+% of cyber companies would be like either failures or very small outcomes, but you'll always get some really big companies in there.
Right. And it's when you underwrite the company first, so a $200 or $300 million acquisition for Sequoia, it doesn't move the needle, I'm sure, on the scale of what you guys are looking for. So you guys look for the next $10 billion business, potentially maybe even bigger now.
Yeah, I would say when I joined Sequoia, the motto was we want to find things that can be 10 billion plus companies. And yeah, with inflation, I think it's closer to 20 billion
20
plus.
So that's also from this kind of like interesting subject is maybe like the size of the funds, right? So funds have grown, but now the acquisition numbers are bigger, or the IPO market should potentially be bigger in 5 to 10 years from today. Yeah. So it's like it's interesting stuff. So also one of the things you guys invest in is defense, or have a focus internally about defense strategy.
So the reason I react that way to that, Sequoia is much less thematic internally than people would think. Like we respond at all moments. We're just looking to find the best investment opportunities in whatever category or geography. It doesn't matter. With defense, it's more that there's these very powerful why nows that just happened with war in Ukraine, war in Israel, unfortunately, and technological changes like rise of drones, rise of autonomy, communications, technologies changes, AI, etc. And so it's created an opportunity for some AI investments. We've done maybe 5 or so over the last 3 years. But I think in 3 years or so, like it won't be a focus, because I think that we'll kind of have passed that window. Mm-hmm. And so it's less to say that defense tech is like a firm-wide focus, and more it's an area that has really strong why nows right now. And so we're spending some time in it.
That makes a lot of sense. Shaun, I started with saying thank you for all you've done for Israel. I'll end on it as well. Thank you for your support. You've been a true friend to our country. We'll never forget that. You should light, one of the, every year there's a big ceremony, and obviously I'm going to advocate for you lighting a torch during that ceremony. And thank you for the support. You've been amazing. And
as I said, I don't do anything compared to the men and women that are in uniform fighting in Gaza, or fighting in the north. Like, it's honestly, what I do is nothing. The only thing that I think I do deserve a little bit of credit for is I try to have my eyes open to anticipate what will come next. And I share that. More people should try to do that. Amazing. More people should try to anticipate what's going to come next.
Thank you, Shaun.
You're the man, Omri.
Love you.
Love you too, bro. Peace.